Amara spent weeks writing down everything she had seen and experienced. She detailed the rituals, the manipulation, and the false teachings. Then, she began reaching out to trusted people, former church members, local leaders, and even a few bold journalists who weren't afraid to uncover the truth. At first, people didn't believe her. How can Pastor Ezekiel, a man of God, be involved in such things? They asked. But as more people started speaking out, the truth became undeniable. Amara's courage inspired others who had been silent for years. When the truth finally came to light, the impact was explosive. Members of Pastor Ezekiel's church began leaving in droves. The once packed auditorium was now empty, the pews gathering dust. Some members were angry, feeling betrayed by the man they had trusted with their lives. Amara watched from afar as the church she had grown up in fell apart. It hurt to see the pain it caused, but she knew it was necessary. The truth had come out, no matter the cost. Amara had finally found peace after exposing her father's evil deeds. She felt closer to God than ever before, finding joy in singing in the choir and studying the word. Each day, her faith grew stronger. But while Amara felt free, she had no idea that trouble was brewing in the background. Back home, Pastor Ezekiel was reeling from the aftermath of his daughter's betrayal. He couldn't believe that Amara, his obedient and loyal child, had exposed him to the world. It was humiliating. His once thriving church was now a ghost town, his name dragged through the mud. His wife, torn between loyalty to her husband and the shocking truth revealed by their daughter, was in turmoil. She asked Pastor Ezekiel repeatedly, "Is it true? Did you do what Amara said?" But Pastor Ezekiel denied everything. How can you believe her lies? She's been poisoned by the devil. Yet, something didn't sit right with her. As she reflected on their years together, a nagging thought grew stronger. Amara might be telling the truth. She remembered the sudden wealth, the shift in Pastor Ezekiel's preaching, and the countless extravagant miracles. She spent days in silence, struggling to reconcile the man she had married with the man Pastor Ezekiel had become. She thought about the early days of their ministry, when they had lived humbly, trusting God for every need. Pastor Ezekiel had once been so devoted to God. Could he really have fallen so far? Finally, one evening, after hours of prayer and reflection, she broke down. Her heart shattered as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The wealth, the change in sermons, and Pastor Ezekiel's evasiveness, it all pointed to one thing: Amara was right. Pastor Ezekiel's wife felt overwhelmed by guilt. She had been so caught up in flaunting her position as the pastor's wife, glorifying in the wealth, that she hadn't noticed when her husband turned away from God. On her knees, she cried out, "Lord, forgive me. I failed as a wife. I also failed as a mother. Please, show me mercy, Lord." She knew the truth now, but it wasn't just her conscience she was worried about. She had read stories about the occult and how they operated. Once their secrets were exposed, they wouldn't hesitate to seek revenge. She feared for her children's lives. She knew she had to leave, but how? Pastor Ezekiel was always watching, suspicious of her every move. Carefully, she began to plan her escape, keeping it a secret even from her two sons. She stashed away money and packed bags, little by little, waiting for the right moments. Pastor Ezekiel, meanwhile, lived in constant fear. He had broken the rules of the occult by allowing his daughter to discover his secrets. He knew the punishment would come. It was only a matter of time. One night, as he slept, the cult leader, known only as the Master, appeared in his dream. The Master's voice was cold and commanding. "You have failed us, Ezekiel. You broke the rules. So, prepare for judgment." Pastor Ezekiel woke up drenched in sweat. He had seen the master in his dreams before, but this time it felt different. The warning was clear. His time was running out. He decided to visit Pastor Emeka, the friend who had introduced him to the cult. Surely, Pastor Emeka could help. But when he explained his situation, Pastor Emeka laughed bitterly. "You're on your own," Emeka said harshly. "You knew the rules." "Ezekiel, how could you be so foolish to let your daughter find out? There's nothing I can do for you. Just wait for the master's judgment." Pastor Ezekiel left, feeling abandoned and hopeless. Pastor Ezekiel's wife saw her chance one day when he was out of the house. She packed up her bags and those of her 2 sons. Her heart pounded as she scribbled a note and left it on the kitchen table. When Pastor Ezekiel returned home and found his wife's note, his hands trembled as he read her words. "I don't know why you refused to tell me the truth, but I refuse to live in lies. I'm sorry I have to go. All I can say now is for you to turn back to God, for it is never too late to run to Him. Don't bother looking for me. Goodbye for now." He sank onto the couch, holding the paper tightly. His chest felt like it was caving in. He read the note again, each word cutting deeper. His wife had left him, the woman he had sacrificed everything for, the wealth, the fame, the lies, all for her happiness. How could she leave me? Pastor Ezekiel muttered to himself, his voice shaking. "After all I have done, how?" The more he thought about it, the more the bitterness grew. It wasn't just the pain of her leaving. No, the true wound was the memory of how it had all started. Pastor Ezekiel leaned back and closed his eyes, and the memories came flooding in. He saw himself as a young man, standing in the pulpit of his first church, preaching with fire and passion. His faith back then had been pure and unshaken, but money had been scarce. He remembered nights when his family went to bed hungry. His wife, once supportive, had grown distant. She started comparing him to other pastors, especially Pastor Emeka. "See, Pastor Emeka," she had said, her voice filled with scorn. "You two started ministry at the same time. In fact, you were ordained on the same day. Have you seen his church? Go there and look at God's faithfulness. He's living large, driving expensive cars, building big churches. But look at us. Ezekiel, hungry, struggling. What kind of God is this?" Her words stung like a whip. Night after night, she would continue. "Our God is not a God of poverty. He wants us to prosper, to live in abundance. Go to Pastor Emeka. Let him show you the way. Let him show you how to do it. Perhaps you don't know how to run your ministry well." Pastor Ezekiel had tried to ignore her at first. He prayed and fasted for God to bless their ministry, but nothing changed. The church stayed small, the bills piled up, and the arguments grew worse. One night, after they had eaten their last scraps of food in the house, his wife refused to even look at him. "You are not a man, Ezekiel," she said coldly. "If you were, you would find a way to take care of your family." Pastor Ezekiel's heart broke. That was the night he gave up. The next morning, Pastor Ezekiel swallowed his pride and went to visit Pastor Emeka. Pastor Emeka had always been friendly, but Pastor Ezekiel could see the difference in their lives. Pastor Emeka's house was massive, his cars luxurious, his lifestyle extravagant. "Ezekiel," Emeka said, laughing as he welcomed him inside, "what brings you here?" Pastor Ezekiel hesitated but finally blurted out, "Emeka, I need your help, please. Show me the way. How do I grow my ministry? How do I succeed? I see how God has blessed you so well. Please, show me the way." Pastor Emeka smirked. "I wondered when you would come. Sit down." As they talked, Emeka spoke in riddles, quoting verses from the Bible. "If the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. But wisdom brings success." And that is from Ecclesiastes chapter 10 verse 10. Wisdom is the key, my brother. You know the Bible says that wisdom is profitable to direct. Emeka said, you need to be smart about ministry. You need to use your head. You need to apply wisdom. Use your resources wisely. If you are willing, I can show you the path. Pastor Ezekiel hesitated. Something about Emeka's tone felt off, but desperation silenced his doubt. What do I need to do? He asked. Pastor Emeka smiled. I will take you to a place where prayers are answered and success is guaranteed. But you must be ready to commit fully. On the agreed day, Pastor Emeka took Pastor Ezekiel to a secluded location far from town. The atmosphere was heavy, the air thick with the scent of burning incense. Inside the building, men in robes stood around a dark altar, their faces expressionless. Pastor Ezekiel felt a chill run down his spine. What is this? He whispered. This, Emeka said, is where true success begins. The occult master, a tall man with piercing eyes, approached Pastor Ezekiel. Do you wish to prosper? He asked. Pastor Ezekiel hesitated but nodded. Then you must follow the rules. The master continued. You will become wealthy, famous, and powerful. Your church will grow beyond your imagination. But in return, you must offer a sacrifice each year. One soul from your congregation. That is the price. Pastor Ezekiel's heart stopped. Sacrifice? No, I can't do that. You have no choice, the master interrupted. If you leave now, you and your family will face unspeakable consequences. Once you've entered here, there is no going back. Pastor Ezekiel's mind raced. He thought about his wife, his children, their hunger and suffering. He thought about his small empty church, and he thought about Pastor Emeka standing there with his wealth and success. Emeka leaned in. Why are you acting like a child? This is how we thrive. This is what makes us men. This is what makes us who we are. Do you want to stay poor forever? Trapped and terrified, Pastor Ezekiel gave in. The initiation was completed, and he left that night feeling like a different man. The promises of the cult came true almost immediately. Pastor Ezekiel's church grew rapidly, filled with thousands of members. His sermons drew crowds, and miracles seemed to happen at every service. He built a massive church building, bought luxurious cars, and moved his family into a grand home. But the sacrifices weighed heavily on him. Each year, he had to offer someone from his church, a volunteer, who unknowingly became part of the ritual. The guilt gnawed at his soul, but he buried it beneath the fame and riches. Now, sitting in his empty house with his wife's note in his hands, Pastor Ezekiel was consumed by regret. I did it for her, he whispered to himself. For her and the children. Why did she leave me? But the last line of her note haunted him. It is never too late to return to God. Pastor Ezekiel wanted to believe those words. But how could God forgive a man like me? A man who had sacrificed innocent souls and led his congregation astray. How? So he thought. That night, Pastor Ezekiel had another dream. The master appeared, his eyes cold and unforgiving. You have failed us, the master said. You allowed your daughter to expose us. Now, you must pay the price. Sacrifice your daughter, or you and your entire family will perish. Pastor Ezekiel woke up trembling. Sacrifice Amara. How could he? He didn't even know where she was. Desperate, Pastor Ezekiel tried to appease the master with offerings, but nothing worked. The verdict was final. Determined to find her, Pastor Ezekiel hired men to track Amara down. He promised them a generous reward if they brought her back alive. Meanwhile, Amara was oblivious to the danger. She continued living her life peacefully, unaware that her father's men were closing in. One evening, as she walked to a night vigil, She noticed two men following her. Her heart raced as fear gripped her. She felt the spirit prompting her to change her route. But before she could act, the men started running towards her. "Stop!" one of them shouted, but Amara refused to stop. She ran, her breath coming in gasps as she darted through the streets. She prayed desperately, "Lord, please protect me. Please, don't let them catch me." But the men were relentless. After several minutes, they caught up to her, grabbed her arms, and tied her hands. Amara screamed, but the street was deserted. Meanwhile, Pastor Ezekiel waited anxiously for news. He knew the master's judgment was looming and the clock was ticking. Will Pastor Ezekiel go through with the court's demand? Or will he find courage to turn back to God? And what will happen to Amara as she faces the men who captured her? Watch out in the next part. If you like this video, I'm sure you will enjoy the next one. Click to watch it now. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.